Hi. Hello. Hello. So welcome to Drag Bingo. I'm David Nash, and I probably have the coolest job as a regular contributor for Architectural Digest and Elle Decor and House Beautiful. I get the opportunity to talk to really amazing architects and designers and collectors and artists and industry insiders. And tonight we get to talk with three such people from the Bay Area about the value of art, architecture, and design. So we will start to my right here. For 20 years, Holly Baxter, the principal of Holly Baxter and Associates, has been providing curatorial and art advisory services for individuals, corporations, and institutions. She was also behind the launch of RH Contemporary Art, which included the acquisition of the Rain Room by UK-based collective Random International in 2013. Rain Room went on to be lent to the Museum of Modern Art in New York and is now in the permanent collection of LACMA. David Darling is a founding partner of Adlin Darling Design, recipients of awards too numerous to mention. They do include 2 James Beard Awards for restaurant design, 7 National American Institute of Architects Awards, and a Cooper Hewitt Design Award. His firm's discipline include, but are not limited to, institutional, commercial, and residential architecture. And lastly, we have Claudia Juestel, who's co-founder and principal designer of Adini Design Group. And since 1999, she has focused on designing high-end residential and commercial interiors for clients throughout the world. In 2016, she opened Adini Design Gallery to showcase curated offerings from European art, decor, and furniture, and your own private label goods. So to begin. One's perception of value is the driving force behind making decisions on spending money, time, and effort for any undertaking. And that can vary greatly based on things like culture, socioeconomics, or even generational beliefs. And tonight's discussion would have been, it has been literally 2 years in the making and would have been a lot different had it taken place in April of 2020. In the last 2 years, we've encountered a global pandemic, the effects of which we're still dealing with. We have had significant racial issues, the effects of which we're still feeling. We've had an incredible and continued political divide, the effects of which we're still feeling. And now we're in the middle of a European war, the effects of which we will be feeling for a very long time. So I think this is all to say that the perceived value of art, architecture, and design will still be measured in about the same ways, whether it's monetarily, aesthetically, culturally, or with regard to historical significance. But there's definitely going to be a shift, and I think we'll probably touch on that tonight. Let's see. So I want to ask everyone here the same question, and that is, apart from the way you make a living, what is your relationship to Holly art?
apart from how I make a living, well, I grew up around art. My parents collected art, and we had a lot of art in our home. I had an uncle who was a professional artist. Spent a lot of time in my childhood going to the Nelson Atkins Museum, which really instilled a passion for art in me as a young person that continued throughout my life. But when I'm not working in my for-profit business, I work with two nonprofits, the Human Rights Foundation, where I'm executive director for their art and protest program. We support and give a platform for dissident artists from authoritarian regimes, something that I think is very important. We're seeing the importance of it. What happens if we allow authoritarians to go too far? We're seeing that in Ukraine right now, which I'm wearing yellow and blue in support of Ukraine, where my grandparents were from. And work with the Gray Area Foundation for the Arts, where I'm on the board of directors, and we have an artist in residence program there for dissident artists now. So, yeah.
David?
My personal story involves a number of sort of serendipitous moments that involved kind of a transition from a formal education steeped in postmodernism and neoclassicism to one that relies more on nature and natural phenomenon. And I worked with when I was in college, I did an internship with a protege of the late Luis Barragan, a Mexican architect, who introduced me to a completely different way of thinking about design that was rooted in nature and natural phenomena. And I realized that this was this incredible kit of parts that was completely being missed. And it led to sort of a manifesto and the basis of our practice, which was to design for all the human senses and to think about phenomenology and how a space feels, how it sounds, how it smells, in addition to how it looks. Beyond that, I mean, I'll quote my partner, Joshua Adlin, who in a recent acceptance speech said, when you lay your head down on your pillow at night, you have to ask yourself, how can you make the world a better place? And so there's a spiritual side to what we do that just drives me and connects me on a daily basis.
Claudia, your relationship to design.
Well, is it on? Okay, sorry. For me, it's all-encompassing art, architecture, and design. And that probably has a lot to do with the way I grew up in Austria, being surrounded by incredibly beautiful architecture from many, many centuries. And when I was a child, I probably took it for granted. I really appreciated that when I left, and I always go back to that. And my family is all made up of musicians, craftsmen, and artists, and that will always continue to influence me in my work, as well as personally in my outlook on the world. And you said something about making the world a better place, David, and it made me think about the best thing is when a client really loves what we do. And when they say something like, I'm sitting in my living room, I'm having a glass of wine, and things like, you changed my life. We don't do brain surgery. We do very simple things. I'm like, that's a strong statement. And they start telling stories about how it would bring their family together, of having a new house and things like that. That is so special in such a small way, where I can't compete with something like the Human Rights Foundation. But we do make very small contributions to the world amongst a few people that make them happy and feel better and create a nest for them. And that's all rooted in how I like to approach design from an all-encompassing sort of perspective that goes way back. And I love it all. I can't have good design without good art and good architecture.
that leads me to the idea of quality. And I know, Claudia, you come from a long line of artisans, craftspeople, and I wonder how, this is for all of you, I wonder how the idea of quality, what does it mean? What's it mean to you, and how is it tied to your belief in the value of what you do, design or art or architecture?
Me first?
Anyone?
Again. Quality, the understanding of quality maybe requires a little bit of education. And I probably didn't know as much 30, 40 years ago, but every day I take on a new project, I learn something new. And that's what still keeps it exciting after 30 years or so doing design, is that learning. And often doing that together with clients makes it even more fun. And so quality, I learn new things about a new product, an artist that I haven't known about before, or a new method of doing something. And it's exciting. It really is wonderful, and to never stop learning. And some of the things I've known for a long time, I look at it, I don't have to look at it, I know if it's good or bad. But other things, I still learn about it, and that's wonderful to me.
We often talk about sustainability in the context of quality, because sustainability is such a quantitative thing these days, and there's a lot of data mechanisms to measure it, and there's lead checklists and so on and so forth. So naturally we are like, okay, what's the qualitative aspect of this? And it goes back to like a really early argument that Joshua and I had when we first started our firm around a wood shop. We had this piece of mahogany that we were getting ready to run through a bandsaw. And we're like, what is the moral implication of taking this tropical hardwood and running it through this bandsaw? And it was a really interesting conversation we refer back to often, which is that this piece of wood has already been harvested. It's sitting here in our shop. It could become, we could veneer it and create a wall with it, or we could create a beautiful table with it, and it becomes a family heirloom that gets passed through time. And I think for us, whether it's a piece of wood or an object, we used to go to the junkyard and find these objects and then create tables and like things with them. Like, how do we reincarnate something? And then now buildings, how do we reincarnate buildings to give them a new life and give them longevity? And it's, to this day, I would say it's the greenest, most sustainable thing you can do is reincarnate something and give it like an infinite life. So there's tremendous value in that, obviously. But
when I think about value in art, I'm looking for art that's intellectually and conceptually bold, technically accomplished, aesthetically appealing. I think education is important, and understanding of art history, and also understanding or being knowledgeable about an artist's body of work, so that you can discern if one work's superior to another and why. I think all of these things factor into quality.
More broadly, on the same topic about beliefs, how have your beliefs or perception of value changed since you began your careers? We're all
Is
looking
this
at
going
you.
in a row?
We're looking at you, Claudia.
David.
I'll jump in. So as I look at the screen at one of our projects, we camp out at our job sites, and we camped out at that one, which was really fun. And it allows us to connect to things that we would not ever be able to connect to if we were back in the office. And I'd say that is one thing that we were like, we're not going to give this up. So in some ways, I'm answering your question backwards. The virtue of that has just gained appreciation through the years. And we also have a wood shop in our office. So there's a 1-to-1 ratio or relationship to what we're actually working with. And it's not to say we don't use digital tools to do what we do, but we never want to lose touch with all those other things.
Well, that's what your practice is built on, is that philosophy. Right?
Yeah. But it's interesting because so the camping on the site is one part of the equation, and then getting to know our client and basically trying to foster or propagate a relationship with the client is a huge part of what we do. And some clients are more receptive to that than others. Some say, okay, we're going overseas and let us know when it's done and we'll come back. And I would argue that those are probably the less successful projects, because what we do is like this mind meld with clients, and it's over the years we've gained greater appreciation for that, this sort of mind meld with the client, so we can kind of be in simpatico with their thinking.
We were talking last week, and you mentioned that you really want to be involved with the clients, not with their assistants or their associates or people who, pay the bills, but you want to be involved with the homeowner, the person that's going to live in the space. And did you start out that way too, or?
No, we learned through the School of Hard Knocks, and we've had celebrity clients where
Name some.
where they have their people, that you talk to, and then if we, in the interview process, it's like, no, we want to meet the people we're working for, not the people we're necessarily working with. And then when we meet them, we explain to them that really, to get the most out of this, we need to establish a relationship. And I know it's inconvenient and you're busy, blah, 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 but we need to establish a relationship so we can act in your interest. And it's just, it's a joy for them and for us. It's a journey for both of us.
I agree with that. The same. The most important and valuable thing a client can give me is their time. And I have some clients I've been working with for 20 years now. And that process of looking and being very mindful and being very engaged, I think it leads to the best results and the ones that the client is most connected with. And they may start out not being really passionate about art. Maybe they start out just being very tactical. I just want to get this project done. But if they'll give me their time, I like to have them, really fall in love with art and artists in the process of looking primarily, and hopefully the process of collecting, and then perhaps being a patron as well at the end of all of it.
Claudia, when did your clients discover you were camping out in their homes? And have you been doing that from the beginning?
Haven't done it yet. But now 2 parts to this question. One, the value component monetarily and how it may have changed. Obviously, in the beginning of my career, the budgets were smaller. And I've also had the pleasure of working with some clients for 25, 26 or more years. And I see them having bigger budget as they've gotten older and have made more money. And it does make it nice when you can buy more beautiful things, but it's not always the most important thing. And I just believe very, very strongly that you should always get the best you can afford in anything. And that can be something very small for someone starting out buying their first piece of art or decorating their rental apartment versus one day having a 32,000 square foot house. And it changes, but it should be the best you can afford. I feel like if you can afford it, there's no excuse not getting the best quality. And if you have a smaller budget, then there are other ways to do it. Flea market, consignment stores, same applies to fashion. And style is not really bound by money, and good taste isn't, and good design isn't. And sometimes as creative people, we like those constraints. Not to say we don't like big budgets, but sometimes when you have certain constraints, it pushes you more to come up with other solutions than when you have the sky is the limit. And to get to the relationship part is nothing is more important than the relationships we have with our clients. And I would never want to design for somebody's assistant and having to Google somebody of what they might like. That would be absolutely horrible. I want to get into people's heads. And when I figure out their quirks, like some crazy hobby, or they were in the Peace Corps when they were young, or they do one specific thing every year, and all of that tells me who that person is. And when I do residential design, I want people to walk in the house and know this is their house, not so-and-so designed it and there's a signature on it. I really want someone to walk in and know this is their friend's home and it reflects who they are. And for that, you need to know people, and the relationship between a client and an interior designer can be extremely intimate, and you learn a lot about each other. So having respect for one another and liking one another is incredibly important. I can't build a nest for someone I don't like. It's that simple.
It's probably easier when you have clients, like you say, for 20 years, 30 years that you've been working with. Is there something that you can identify in your client's background that sort of dictates their value system in relation to design or architecture or art?
Everyone's looking at me.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think a foundation of respect for what it is we're about to embark on is fundamental. And I'm just kind of reflecting on various clients, and some of them have art backgrounds. Some of them are serious collectors. One of which Holly knows, but that doesn't necessarily impact the relationship. Like we have clients who are completely new to design, and it's equally gratifying. Or we designed a high school for an underserved community in Santa Rosa, and it was one of the most gratifying projects we ever did. And they were all in. Like, that's what I think we look for, is being all in. Like, let's embark on this journey together.
Does Holly, this is for you, actually for all of you in a different way, does the act of collecting art indicate a certain level of sophistication? When someone hires you, what are you thinking?
Yeah, if someone hires an art advisor, I think they're sophisticated enough to know that they need a specialist. But my clients, they also hire attorneys and interior decorators and architects as well. So they're used to working with experts. So yes, I would say yes to that. What was there a second part to that? Sorry.
That's good.
Okay.
There's no wrong answers. Claudia?
What was the question? I got wrapped up in Holly's answer.
When somebody decides to hire an interior designer instead of go out on their own and try to, outfit their entire house, does it indicate a level of sophistication, in your opinion?
I had one particular client hire me for a rental, and they spent quite a bit of money on improving also some of the interior architecture. And I was really surprised that they were spending that much money. And then I learned that they grew up in a family where the parents had interior designers. So it was something normal for them to do. This is what you do to do it right. Versus sometimes somebody who's never done it before, it may be a much bigger step, and thinking, how much money am I going to spend on this in addition to all the furnishings and everything? And is it going to be worth it, not having gone through this before? So I think the sophistication sounds like a dirty word in some ways, but it goes back to education and what you've been
Curiosity.
surrounded by. Mhm.
And I'll add to that. I would echo that as well. I mean, I have clients that are very sophisticated collectors, and I have clients that hire me because they're new to collecting and they want to learn. So it really runs the gamut.
What's more fun, working with the newer collectors or working with seasoned collectors?
It's both. It's both. It's fun.
Also, to put a business spin on it, which is something I never do. There's the client who knows the virtue of hiring a professional, and the rental being an exception to this. They know that it's going to add value and equity to the whole proposition, whether it's art, architecture, or interior design. What they end up with in the end is going to be far greater than what they could imagine, hopefully.
You just flashed an image. Can you go back one? One of my clients, who's a corporate client who's here, the J. Paul Company. This is they hired my firm to not only acquire art for the permanent collection of, this is 181 Fremont, it's a penthouse in 181 Fremont, but to curate exhibitions within the building as well, and to collaborate with their design teams. And this is one of the penthouses that's for sale there. But they were sophisticated enough to know how important art was to really elevate the design and enhance the architecture, and to have an art advisor collaborating with their design team. So yeah, I think this is an example where you, even within, the non-private, a corporate client, where art is very considered and it's a very sophisticated approach to acquiring it.
When a client comes to you, David, and they want to build a house, do they know what they want to start?
That image you see on the screen right now, what started out as a Palladian villa.
Oh, I see.
And actually, a very sophisticated client with an extremely good eye gave us a napkin sketch of a Palladian villa and said, I want something modern, but with classical sensibilities. And then she, as a patron and ambassador of creativity, fully embraced this journey, which led to this pretty epic project for us. And so I think, it varies. There are clients who have no idea, but they all come to us for some semblance of what we offer. So there's definitely a filter there for sure. But
I'm thinking about accessibility, and in particular, thanks to technology, it's so easy to find things that look like more expensive things. You can buy art online, you can buy original art, you can buy, prints, multiples, things like that. You can buy a pre-built house. You can find designer interiors for less. In these cases, what's your opinion about bypassing the experience? Some of the people who do that, and they take this on themselves, and they don't get the experience of having an expert designer or somebody who's really thoughtful about architecture or art, and they just, they try to do this themselves, even if they have the money to hire, a professional.
I don't recommend buying art online. Unless you know the work, you're already familiar with the work, the specific work, or know the artist's body of work really well. I mean, the experience of being present in front of the art is very different than the experience of the image mediated through the computer screen. And not only that, it will look very different in person. Your experience of it will be very different, but you don't really understand the condition of the work, which particularly for secondary market works, you want to inspect it in person, have a condition report. But yes, I I don't think that's the best way to acquire art.
We don't even buy lighting without going to look at it.
You should.
Yeah. And people who know us know where we stand on your question. There's a contemporaneous aspect to it, and there's obviously the phenomenal connection to what you're getting yourself into, which is why we camp out on our job sites. But
I learned a new term the other day, and it's phenomenology. Will you talk a little bit about that?
So, and this is a perfect image, hopefully it'll stay on the screen, of an example where we think in terms of phenomenal and qualitative aspects of design. And so this particular courtyard marks the passage of time throughout the day, depending on how the light comes through. And at about 3 o'clock, the wind kicks up and those silhouettes move and animate that wall. And that's all part of a kit of parts that has nothing to do with arches and towers and doorways. It's more about like how it feels and how you can connect to connect to nature, really. But you can kind of hear the wind. You can feel it with your eyes. There's this connection. We talk about the body as a vehicle for all the senses, and they're all interconnected, and they're all helping you experience a space. And it's an active, kind of bodily, physical thing that you experience, and certain aspects of it are embedded in your memory, which is pretty powerful when you think about it. Like taste and smell are embedded in memory, which is extremely powerful design tool when you think about it. And then how vision connects to those things becomes a really important part of it. And a lot of South American designers and Mexican designers, Luis Barragán, understood that concept.
I'm a huge fan of Josef Hoffmann. And when he started the Wiener Werkstätte with Coleman Moser, the concept was Gesamtkunstwerk. And I really believe that. It means the whole piece of art. And as an interior designer, I'm sort of in the middle of an architect, landscape architect, art, all of it. And I feel nothing can work without it. So there are all these shortcuts now because of technology. You can buy furniture online, immediate gratification, you get it right away. And you can do e-design and all those things, but it takes away the romance and the journey. And the journey for me is traveling with a whole design build team and the client and going through this process. Obviously, building a new home is the longest process. So you get to spend time with clients and all your players for a very long time. And sometimes art, maybe we talked about this last week, that art may be incorporated in the very beginning. Often it could be an afterthought. Oh, we have a wall. What are we going to put there? So much more fun if the whole team is there from the beginning and everything is thought out together. And I love think tanks. So for me, a good design project is just one big think tank. And everybody puts their input in, including the clients. And somebody may say, oh, I have a crazy idea. And then it actually works because it brings it up a notch and somebody else figures out how we can make that crazy idea something that could actually work. So taking away the journey, if you don't have to, I'm against it. I think just do it right.
I would add to that everything we do is specific to place and person. So when we tell our clients there will be nothing else like this ever, and it's a moment in time and it will live in perpetuity as a piece of architecture or a piece of design, and that's really important. And you can't get that online. You have to be present for that.
Yep, there's a value in skilled creative professionals for sure. Maybe what are some of the other monetary, practical, or emotional values of working with creative professionals?
Well, I mean, we describe our practice as a creative hub. So we're just the band leaders, but we're a small firm, but we rely on incredible family, really, of craftspeople, builders, artists, designers, musicians, chefs, and our clients, and they contribute to this great alchemy of creativity. And I think that it's so fundamental to what we do, that like broader team. It allows us to stay small as a firm, but it's also allows us to have almost like a brain trust and broader reach. It broadens our reach, and like crazy things happen. Like an engineer suggests that this 300-foot long reflecting pool could be a geothermal heat sink, for a air system in a house. Like, who would have thought of that? It's almost like a mind sweep. So you grab ideas that you never would have been present had you been, like locked up in your silo. I don't know if that answers your question, but
It's a good answer.
Well, it's definitely the stable we have of partners and resources, and also professionals that have been in the industry for decades have access. And not to speak for Holly, but she and I have worked together on projects. I know that somebody else couldn't have gotten certain works of art for her clients if it wouldn't have been for her, because of her relationships and her resources. And the same thing, some of my clients have said, she can find anything. And I can. I scour the world, and I'm really good at finding the oddest little needle in a haystack. And that comes with experience and also a lot of tenacity.
And as an art advisor, you also are bringing in different resources to help with your clients' collections, collection management resources, conservators, appraisers, art insurance, logistics, storage, just the 360 resources that that clients need to acquire and care for their collections.
Claudia, what can you do as an interior designer for a homeowner that they can't do on their own or with an e-design service?
Oh
Like,
my God, how
I mean,
much
you
time do we have? Well, one is experience, two is taking them beyond something they could go on their own. And trust and respect is a big part of it, as we talked about before. And if somebody trusts you, you can push them a little bit. And they're afraid, and you push them a little more, and then all of a sudden they get comfortable, because a lot of people have great taste. But it's very complex of putting everything together. So we're also stylists, and it's just balancing all these things that they love. But just taking them a little bit out of their comfort zone, even ourselves sometimes. Like somebody once told me, you always have to be a little bit scared. And there are things that I come up with, I'm a little bit scared. How is it going to turn out? And you need that. Otherwise, it'll just be boring. And so Holly was mentioning logistics and stuff, like trying to do a project on schedule, whether it's commercial or residential. There's a lot of stress behind the scene, and we always say that there's probably 20% creativity in our business and 80% everything else, trying to make it happen. And when clients sometimes order one or two things on their own and everything goes wrong, then they come back and they go, now I know why I pay you all the big bucks, because it's a pain and you know what, and it's not fun. But you don't see all that. That's behind the scenes. That's the glamour of making a movie. I sometimes liken design to building a stage set for somebody's life. except for I have friends who are in set design and they tell me it's a little bit different. It's like interior design on steroids and nothing has to last. Now, we have to actually make something that lasts, because otherwise we get a phone call 2 years down the road and it's not a good one. So we have to create something with longevity. And we're here, and maybe I can speak for you guys as well, that we're vetting for our clients because of the expertise that we have. And when they trust us, they trust our judgment, and we give them options, and we tell them why one thing may work better than something else. And alone, they wouldn't have to do all that they would have to do all that research. We've done it for them, or we already know. And I think that's a lot of value. And just when do you, going back to money, when do you spend more? And I have a lot of conversations with clients about sometimes it's worth it to spend a little bit more. And we have discussions about how long something's going to last. And I say, okay, divide it over 10 years. How much a year? Is it worth it? And something else I may say, it's not worth spending more. So we have those discussions about money. And on your own, how would you know?
I would add to that we're vetting for clients. We're adding a layer of expertise, but we're also extracting their goals, and which is tricky because it's in some ways we're psychoanalyzing and getting into a pretty interesting area of trying to understand the blue notes of what they're trying to achieve. Sometimes in the most exciting projects, they don't really know yet, and we help them discover what they are after, and that makes it really exciting. And it's another layer to what you're saying.
Sometimes couples don't agree on what their goals are.
Oh yeah, psychologist and marriage counselor, add that to the list.
We call that additional services.
Right.
Yeah. I've been on a few projects where actually I was brought in for mediation more than design.
Do you charge more?
Actually, so we give our clients a programming document, and we request that they fill them out separately, and so they can learn about what one another wants. And it's super healthy. It is kind of marriage counseling, but it's super healthy exercise, and we all become married. It's very interesting.
What happens when they want two totally different things?
Well, there's a reconciliation, and
Of course.
hopefully it goes well.
Holly, what's it like when you're acquiring art for a client and it's a couple and they have two different aesthetics? How do you marry them?
Couples take different approaches. Some want to agree on everything, and they won't buy something unless they both love it. Some take turns. You can have this, and I'll get that. Sometimes it's a battle of the wills. So it's as different as each marriage or each individual and couple are together. Seen it all.
Yeah. Claudia, what's it like marrying two design aesthetics?
It's kind of the same as Holly is describing. It depends on the individual. Sometimes there's one individual that has stronger power when it comes to the aesthetic, and the other one controls the money. So you marry those two. Sometimes they're easy. Sometimes, more often, if it's a husband and wife, the wife is more in charge of aesthetics, and the husband may want one room or one comfortable chair and doesn't care about anything else. But then I also have clients where the wife doesn't care and the husband runs the show in terms of aesthetic. So it's very individualistic. Just like our work, as we've said many times, we're not having cookie cutter projects. We really do very bespoke projects for each client. And if you look at some of the work you see, they're kind of schizophrenically different sometimes. And it's because it's a reflection of the client's goals. And we just bring it out in them.
And then you get the two husbands and the two wives, and it just like the stereotype gets turned on its head. But it's also not limited to residential. We have projects where there's winemakers and they have very specific opinions about how their winery is to be. And it's like the artist studio, the winery. And so we have to be good listeners and find points of commonality between the people involved. And what's really important and what falls by the wayside is really important to sort that out and to help them sort it out amongst themselves.
You've all talked about vetting professionals for your clients. How do they vet you? How do your clients come to you and become clients?
Variety. If somebody has already worked with us, they may refer them to their friends. And that's always the best because they already know the good, the bad, and the ugly. And they will tell their friends everything about you. And that's always the best. Of course, people will find us online and they have a different kind of vetting process. They go to House or Google and read reviews and things like that. But in the end, it's actually meeting and seeing if you get along. I always recommend somebody who's never done this before interview, if they haven't had a recommendation, interview a few different designers and really ask a lot of questions and get to know them, because we will spend a lot of time together. And if someone feels 3 people are equally qualified and they could realize their vision, I think they should hire the one that they think they want to spend the next year or 2 or 3 with. Because again, it's about the relationship that we talked about, and you got to like each other.
I agree with that. I mean, with art collecting, you're never really done. So the relationship can go, decades, and they often do. And you do spend quite a bit of time together. You're traveling together to art fairs, to art studios. So most of my clients are referrals and word of mouth, and referrals from other clients, and sometimes clients will seek me out online as well. But yeah, it's you need to have the right kind of energy and working together, in the right sort of frame of mind about how you want to agreeing on how you want to approach the process, I think, for it to be successful.
Yeah, and we always, when a client is vetting multiple designers, we always suggest that they go visit actual projects. Don't just judge from the printed image, because it'll only tell you so much. Like and actually, if you can visit a designer's project that's been around for a while and see how it's aged, did it age gracefully, or is it looking tired? That's our best sales pitch, really. Is we've had a number of inquiries from the Middle East, and we've only done one project in the Middle East, and it was a gentleman in Doha, Qatar, who took the time to fly to San Francisco to meet us, and that made the difference in terms of us vetting him, but also it allowed him to get to know, which is so important.
You mentioned earlier that when we were talking in the back about a project, a green project that you ended up turning down, and I have to imagine that the client, sought you out and really liked what it was you did, but you ended up not doing it because.
Yeah, so we had an inquiry for some ungodly, like 30,000 square foot house, which on the surface wouldn't be, we would think twice about it, but we would dive into it and say, well, let's break this down and figure this out. They wanted a sustainable 30,000 square foot house. And so there's like the dots are not connecting here. And we try not to judge, like everyone it's their prerogative. But we just weren't the right fit for it. In some ways we were like, at first we were thinking, oh, this is a challenge. We should rise to this challenge. How can we make a 30,000 square foot house sustainable? And then you start crunching the numbers and you're like, do they need a 30,000 square foot house? Or can we find an old building that they could reuse to make a 30,000? It's like all these questions.
Claudia, if you turn down a job, let's say, is there, what would be the primary reason? Because it wouldn't perhaps like meet your,
Well, I always say no project is too small, so it's generally not money. It's more personality that I think I can't work with them because there's not mutual respect, or it would be ugly, and I can't do ugly.
Has that ever
You gotta
happened?
let me do what I can do.
Holly, what are the challenges of working with your clients in terms of like personality? Is it what makes your job difficult?
I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the conversation. The most valuable thing that my clients can give me is their time. And I really want them to look. I really want them to take the time to look at art. So if a client just wants to look at images on a computer, and they really won't leave their office or leave their home and come to look at art, they're just not making great decisions. So that can be problematic. Yes, and I really do enjoy working with couples who are both very involved in the process. It can be quite frustrating when they're really on very opposite ends. I really try to avoid those situations. But yeah, I think time is really important.
And another question with regard to art: is it more with your clients, from your perspective? Is it more about aesthetics, or is it more about like a return on investment? Is it about money? I guess this is really a question for all of you, because you.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, the client needs to love the art and understand it and want to live with it and be really moved by it and want it in their presence. And depending on the spend, of course, that definitely impacts their decision. Is there a secondary market for the work? I mean, if they wanted to GSS, is there, a market they could sell the work into? What will they do with the work? Will it remain in the family? Are they going to donate it to an institution? So all of these things sort of factor into the work, and as it increases in value, they become, more and more important to the client.
And over the last 2 years, I don't see that any of your work has slowed down, at least from my experience writing about, fantastic design, interior. You've all been really busy.
It's true. Home during the pandemic, looking at their walls and like, we should buy some art, or let's look at art now. So yeah, it has been quite busy. Claudia and I have been we're on our fourth project together as well. And our firms work together on a project here in San Francisco too. So I think you guys are all in the same boat, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And to get back to the financial value, somebody once said that furniture is kind of like a car. You drive it off the lot and it's lost its value. That may be true if you've ever tried to consign a piece that is still pretty new. But the value is different than that. It's if you get the most comfortable, wonderful sofa, and every day you come home from a long day, you sink into it, and it just makes you feel better, or the greatest mattress in the world that you could never sell, by the way, that makes a huge difference. And so it's funny to me sometimes, like I interviewed with somebody in LA who just bought a very expensive new house, and I knew what the value of the house was. And the budget that he came up with for the house was minuscule, including fees and everything. And he was literally looking for a designer who could do it for that fee. And what he's getting is not really design, but he said to him there's no value in it. He said the house has real estate value, but the furniture has none. So he's clearly not getting the message, and we didn't end up working together. But there is that perspective that some people have. But as you may have heard tonight, there's so much more to it than just what a sofa or a piece of art costs.
It's interesting because architects are often in a sort of time-based metric in terms of cost.
Mm-hmm.
Like we bill by the hour, but what we do can be so different than that. And I always think back to like a project we did in Aspen where the property, our client had a property that was like $3.5 million. We designed, it was a really challenging property. And I think of what we do as problem solving and value adding. And in this case, that house is like on the market right now for $40 million. And so there's tremendous value to having solved the puzzle. And I say that with all respect to the family of people we work with on that project. But clients don't always see the full equation. And, or maybe, you know, if their like budget is super tight, they need help creating that pro forma to understand where money is going to actually grow versus money is going to just disappear.
Well, thank you. Now I want to turn it over to the audience to ask questions.
Hi. Hi, Holly.
Hi.
Well, first I want to compliment whoever came up with the title for tonight's talk, because I believe that it is so limited and one-dimensional to talk about value with the dollar. And value, I feel, how we as humans affect it and how it affects us is incredibly important, and we don't talk about that enough. So applause for that.
This was Claudia's brainchild.
Thank you, Claudia. My comment is really more architecturally driven, but conceptually, I think it's really open to all of you. I am fortunate enough to be living in one of Adlin Darling's early projects. So in front of all these witnesses, I welcome you to camp out anytime to revisit a 20-plus-year-old project of yours.
Love to.
Which, yes, everyone here is invited. And we know the idea of slow cooking. I'm into slow renovations, and which sounds probably horrific to your ears, to an architect's ears, but I am attempting my slow renovation without touching anything that you and Joshua had done 20 years ago, because I love it. I've had the pleasure to meet Joshua and your entire design team. I gave a talk to about 15, 16 of them. Beale Street Loft is the title.
I was out of town.
Yeah, I know.
That I missed that.
I know. And it is great to hear you speak of Luis Barragan, because as I'm undertaking the slow renovation, I am looking avidly at Luis Barragan. So for you to mention that and the concept of phenomenology, I basically am having an orgasm here in the front row. And, you know, in architecture school, I read Gaston Bachelard's Poetics of Space. I've read it cover to cover 10 plus times, and I am so inspired by it, and I still don't understand a word in it to this day. But the topic I'm heated on is that I feel today there is a terrible misinterpretation of the concept of minimalism. Donald Judd himself said, minimalism was not about nothing. It was about encouraging you to see something, if we're talking about art, Holly, to see something in a deeper, more meaningful way. And I believe that in a society where we are results oriented, I love the concept of slow renovation because it's about process and the value of experience in the process rather than the result. Is how you get there is where the character and the soul of what you have is from, you know. And I feel in the world, in my business of art galleries, you know, I feel like there has been nothing inspiring for me in the development of architecture in art galleries. I think there's been a terrible confluence of architectural design in art galleries with art fair design. I mean, there is no differentiation. And I feel like the misinterpretation of minimalism is that it's about blandness and nothingness. And that's what I'm working up against. And I'd love your opinion of that. But conceptually, it kind of goes really into art, interiors, but it is driven by architecture. So David.
We were just talking about this in the green room, about how hard minimalism is. It's the most difficult and most rigorous kind of platform for design, because it shows everything. Like minimalism is really maximalism. It's everything, because it's gonna reflect everything. And if you think about architecture as a armature for human behavior, minimalism just demands that much more to create that armature. The other thing that I would add is that the idea of renovating over time, I love that, because it kind of, if we could design that way, if our clients would let us do that, it would be awesome. Because and camping out on the site is our micro form of that. But really, like when Joshua bought his house, we were like, oh no, don't design it now. Live in it for a while and let it speak to you, and then design it. And so he was in that house for a couple of years before he started sketching in earnest. And so I wholly embraced that. And if there's a way to, as designers, if there's a way to put that in a bottle, that methodology, and make it schedule efficient for clients, I would do it in a heartbeat.
So each of you spoke to the importance of collaboration in your work with other artisans and other disciplines. And I know, Holly, you're working on a very interesting collaboration in the fashion design world and the art world. Maybe you can speak a little bit to that. I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, sure. And to comment on your observation that art galleries have not been the most inspiring architectural spaces. White Cubes, it's a place to go and see, you know, a curated presentation of a body of work. However, they all are pretty much alike, like the art fairs. However, we do have an art gallery in San Francisco that I'd like to invite you all to come visit. It's Gallery 181. It is not your typical White Cube. It's on the 56th floor of 181 Fremont. And it's really beautiful, inspiring views. And there's actually art that's curated in the building that allows you to experience it in a residential setting. And you know, I work with quite a few of the galleries in San Francisco, from Anthony Meyer Fine Art, Jessica Silverman, Altman Siegel, and they really love having their art in that settings and bringing collectors in. The 56th floor, Gallery 181, we've hosted exhibitions from galleries from around the world that don't have a brick and mortar presence in San Francisco. We have a show up now from Ruth Malger's gallery from Berlin. The previous show was Mitchell Innes and Nash. We've had Blum and Poe, Lehman Maupin. And the idea behind it was the J-Paul company makes this space available to these galleries so that they can present their programs and allow San Francisco community to experience these exhibitions and works that they might not see in San Francisco otherwise. But Matt's referring to an upcoming exhibition which is a new collaboration between two artists, one a fashion designer, Naeem Khan, and a painter, Stanley Castleman, and they are called Case Projects, and they will be launching and having their inaugural exhibition, Jardin de Nuit, on April 7th is the opening at 181 Fremont, and I'd like again to invite all of you to come to this exhibition. It's going to be really fabulous. I wish I'd brought some photographs now, Matt, of the art so I could give a little preview of it, but yeah.
Hi, I'd love to hear if you have any stories of clients who have really surprised you with their values. So what I'm thinking of is like in an architectural setting, a client who maybe said, you know, this element might not add financial value to my home, but I really value adding this particular element. Or if there was a piece of art that might have not had financial value, but a client said to you, this speaks to me, I value having this thing. So do you have any stories of clients that have surprised you with something that they placed value on?
I'm just thinking about one innocent thing. I have one client for whom I did a commercial project, a very fun one, a doctor's office that doesn't look like a doctor's office. There are some slides on here. And they gave me a minuscule budget. And I said, well, let's see what we can do with that. And I created a budget for that. And the funny thing was, like, every time I showed them different options, he would always pick the most expensive thing without knowing the price. And I don't know how he did it. Literally every single choice. And he went with it. And I wasn't trying to push it. I just say, here are some options. And lo and behold, every single time. So he surprised me because he started out with a small budget. But what I learned from that, and also from other occasions, nobody knows really what a budget should be unless they've done it before. And I sometimes liken it to like going to Whole Foods and you walk out with 2 bags and you're like, how can it be $200? I didn't get any wine or anything. And then you add a few zeros. So unless you do a proper budget, you really don't know. But in terms of aesthetic, as you get to know people, they surprise you often because you know somebody for a few months and then you get to know them better and you spend time with them. Like Holly said, travel with them and you get to know them more personally. And then they surprise you that you can actually maybe take them a little further than you would have aesthetically before that because your perception has changed of them. And that continues to happen even with some of my clients I've worked with for decades. They surprise me, which makes it fun. I mean, any relationship, right? If we keep surprising each other, we want to stick around.
I would add, or I would agree, in that both the client and the site can present unexpected things, and that's what really makes it exciting. That's what gives the project a life, like a soul, because otherwise we're just stamping them out. Like the project has to have a soul. And so that unexpected thing that the client's going to throw at us is what gives it the life.
Yeah, I've definitely had clients inspire me to come up with solutions, commissioned works. For example, I had a client just last week who wants to do have a room, a very large room that's entirely immersed in digital art. So we're working on that project right now. And then I've surprised clients too. One in particular, who's a mutual client of ours, where I brought work into their home from their parents' home, which they really hadn't thought about doing. But it was really meaningful to them when they started a family. And it was really wonderful to bring in, some art that they had grown up with, and very nice of the parents to let them have it too. So it's gone kind of both ways.
Can you talk more about the digital room?
Specifically, well,
I think it's interesting. Like,
yeah.
I relate to everything you guys have talked about today.
Yeah.
But when I talk to younger people, they often relate to maybe like a metaverse or to
Sure.
art being like more digital.
Yeah, yeah.
And so this idea of doing more digital art
Mhm.
in a room
Yeah.
is kind of the blending of those two things. So
It's
I was
true.
interested just in that you said that.
The one mutual client that we shared, he built a digital room in his home, and so I commissioned work for that space. The walls were basically screens. And the client who I referenced that I spoke to last week, he wants to have digital artworks that are projected into the space. And in this case, they'd only be visible in the evening, but he's really interested in having the home be a very different experience during the day. The home's on the water. And then at night, it transitions into a very different kind of environment.
One thing
Both immersive, right? Both of those things are immersive.
Exactly.
in different ways, yeah. One thing that we caution clients is to have fun with it, or we try to encourage them to have fun and not search for the holy grail. And the immediacy of the digital can often give the illusion that there's a search for the perfect solution. And when the reality is it's something that you set in motion and it takes on a life of its own over the course of the client's lifetime and in perpetuity. And so the sort of digital or metaverse or whatever you want to call it gives an illusion that there's an absolute environment, and there really is no set. The absolute environment is the fact that it goes on. And I think that's what I would convey to our clients.
Any other questions?
I have one. So, thank you. Thanks. Thank you for sharing your passion with us. So I have, I guess the closest term I can think of is commitment phobic about art. And so I'm always like worried about, well, sure, I like it today. It's a sunny day. I'm in a happy mood and I love it. And then a year from now, I'm going to look at the very same thing and I'm going to be like, why is this here? And it brings, there's this quote that I remember that the only person you sleep with for your entire life, night after night, is yourself. And so to me, I think art for me is kind of similar in that sense. I have to sleep with it and wake up with it every single day. And if I'm, investing a good chunk of, my earnings into it, I want it to be something that's going to last or like have value that maybe I can then resell. Ideally for me personally, I would like it to be something that I hang on to because I love the story behind having some sort of, inheritance to it, attached to it, like passing it on and the stories that go with it, how you got it and what you did with it and things like that. So what do you recommend in trying to get over the commitment phobic feeling when you can't see it day in, day out? Like, it's not like I can go to an art gallery and maybe see it, for a while and really experience it. But it's like maybe I see it once or twice and I'm not sure.
Your question dovetails to what I was talking about earlier, and I'll let you guys answer this, but we had a client who interviewed 10 architects and visited projects before they hired us. And we're like, oh, this is a red flag. And then great, they're awesome. And we've done multiple projects for them over the years, and they're dear friends. They hired multiple interior designers and art consultants. And it was the phenomenon that you're describing. And one of my colleagues just said, this isn't like a life and death situation. You should, he just spoke freely and he's like, you should have fun with this and not think of it so deterministically. And it was that holy grail syndrome. It's like, you can make mistakes and learn from them and adapt to them. You can buy pieces and sell pieces and actually have fun with the process.
I recommend looking a lot before you buy, especially if you're going to make a significant investment in the art. The more you look, the more your eye evolves, and the more you learn about what you like and what you don't like. So take your time, but it's no guarantee that the work won't mean as much to you, or you won't get as much of enjoyment out of it later. You can always put it in storage, donate it, sell it. There's lots of other options if you absolutely do not want to own that work anymore, or have it in your presence. It's happened to me. There's works that collected years ago that don't resonate with me as much, and that I have in storage. And I may bring them out again and hang them again, and I may connect with them again over time. But there's something that's going. If you've bought it in the first place, there's something about that work that really captured your attention and your interest and your emotions. So don't be afraid. You can't buy too much art. There's no limit. Yeah. Yeah. There's really no mistakes,
And means is a relative thing. And I think of like amateur collectors I think of some like famous collectors who started out as amateur collectors with very little means, and it's relative, obviously.
I was thinking about what you said, people at home staring at their walls a lot more. What's really changed, it might be too soon to tell, but with everyone being at home and not working in an office, all of your mediums, like have you noticed anything that surprised you as far as what you're designing or what you're delivering now that people are, in a different space all the time?
Well, we're definitely doing more home offices, and not just a little desk in the corner, like full-blown home offices. So that's definitely a big difference. Unfortunately, the supply chain has created havoc. And so now with people having been at home and still wanting immediate gratification as they have in the past, that's become really challenging. So when it comes to furniture, I've had a lot of unhappy people and having to tell them I can't produce miracles and hoping for patience. So that's been a little bit challenging, but people are getting used to it, and if they trust us, they know we're doing our best.
I feel like the way people work was already evolving before the pandemic. So whether it's an attorney or a designer, the concept of a home office, like we had one attorney client who the office was the whole house, so like just different work environments. And so I think it was already evolving. So in some ways it hadn't really been too impacted by the pandemic.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier in the talk, just my clients being at home all the time and looking at their walls and thinking about wanting to have some works in their environment that really brought them joy, and they really enjoyed spending time with, significant amount of time.
Not only the interiors, but the exteriors. I mean, people are living more outdoors, I think, too. Maybe more outdoor sculpture is something they consider, or more, usable outdoor space to design for and design.
Or homes outside of the city. We've been doing more of those in the last 2 years as well.
Weekend homes close to you can drive to versus traveling. So people have definitely invested more in weekend homes, and quite a few of our clients have bought one in the last couple of years.
I had a quick question, sir. I feel like you know the term Instagrammable, and I've noticed that. Oh, sorry. I've noticed that some of my friends who design spaces and work with designers and things like that, they've created spaces which are very Instagrammable. That's the only way I can think about it.
It takes a lot of work to make something look that good.
But you know what I mean? It's like when you go to their space, like if it's a big backyard with like a swimming pool and like multiple entertainment centers, etc., they've created little spaces where like it would be perfect for that picture with your friends or whatever. And so everyone gravitates towards that for at least one picture, and then they continue to mingle. So have you noticed anything like that? Like, with some of the spaces that you're designing, that this
Well, that
culture
has to
of
do with
Instagram has
photography
seeped
in general, because when you have a vignette, it's close up, it draws you in. And Instagram, if people look at it on the phone, it's this tiny. So if you have a whole huge living room that's in the image, you don't read it the same as you do something close up where it's more of a composition. So that's always been the case in magazines as well. But now we're looking at multiple little squares by different people all the time. So it's not curated like a magazine article would be. But it's kind of the same thing. I think it's all photography and how it's being styled.
Yeah,
Would you agree?
I've been to plenty of shoots where the house did not look like it looks in the magazine. Completely different.
Or you mean many?
or the art.
All of them.
All of them, yeah. It's very rare. Yeah,
No toys, no mess.
yeah, nobody
There's a-
lives there.
There's a great book called Building Desire, and it's about the Barcelona Pavilion by Mies van der Rohe. And it's about how people know that building having never been there. And it's really fascinating book about kind of getting to your point. But we always talk about the choreography of experience and how it involves all the senses and whatnot. And I guess we discourage the Instagram moments, but they can kind of just happen spontaneously, maybe.
But I think we think more three-dimensionally, especially as an architect, and I sometimes have the pleasure to get involved in that sense where we work really closely together with the architect, and you think about the sense of arrival. And if you work with the landscape architect, what's the front of the house, the courtyard? And then when you walk into the entry, is it tall? Is it dark? Is it light? How do you transition through spaces? So that's sort of how we design. Although I have caught myself when I take a before picture and I'm thinking of the after picture. What's the money shot? The fireplace? How would it look in an image? Kind of frame it in your head. Occupational hazard.
I'm just curious in terms of both architecture and design in particular, and it probably applies to art collecting as well. How much control you have over the builder and how important that is in terms of creating a successful project.
The builder is extreme. I'm going to jump in and answer this. Extremely important. We see the builder as an extension of our office. And if it's someone like the project we did in Aspen, we'd never met the builder before. And now he's like part of our family. And his mastery and his family of trades were critical. I feel like our success is owed to the builders. So it's very important. It would be my answer to that.
I'd like to add something on the monetary side of this is when architects and designers make recommendations of a few builders and clients interview them, or clients get recommendations by friends. And then also sometimes we help them vet these budgets. Now, if you do new construction, obviously you're going to spend more on construction than anything else. So that's the biggest part of the budget. So that's the one that clients most likely want to control or maybe reduce. And then oftentimes they want to go with the cheaper builder, and then we don't get what we designed because you can't cut corners and do it right. And that can be really devastating. So having a quality builder and a healthy budget, not going crazy, a healthy, appropriate budget makes all the difference in the world. And even though we can design on a certain budget sometimes and maybe use a different material and still be creative about it, there's still a quality factor in the construction and in the finishes. And I've seen things sadly sometimes go wrong just because of the wrong contractor. And it's devastating, and it hurts not just me and my design sensibility, but it hurts me for my clients. So I think it's really, really important to vet the builders very thoroughly.
It's a topic for a whole nother conversation.
Next week. All right, well, I want to thank our panel, Claudia, David, Holly, for joining us tonight, and thank you.